Hello, YouTube. Today I just want to do my next in the series of my strat guides. And in this video, I'm gonna cover the cube mechanic in Torchlight. So cube is quite an interesting one. Unlike Black Sail, cube has a lot of points. Like, an absurdly large amount of points that you can put into it. And thanks to that, you're actually able to do a large amount of juicing when running the cube mechanic. So what exactly is cube? Cube is essentially the slates mechanic of this game. So whenever you go into your talent tree, you see the Statue of the New God. The Statue of the New God is your slates that consists of fallen starlights, corners, goddess of knowledge, or whatever like divinity goddess you have, slates. All of these corners, starlights, and divinity slates come from the cube mechanic. The only thing that does not come from the cube mechanic that goes in the Statue of the New God section would be the pedigree. The pedigrees just come from the Watchers. It is not related to cube at all. And not only are you able to drop these slates from doing the cube mechanic, but the materials used to imprint on them or brand them also comes from the cube mechanic. So you have these transcendence wedges, which is used to, put a blue brand on the slate, to upgrade it to a purple brand, and then also be able to upgrade it to a legendary brand. And when upgrading to a legendary brand, you also have these divinity packs, which also come from the cube mechanic, although very rarely, which can then allow you to target a specific mod. So generally speaking, whenever you're busy branding a slate, you can go in the affix list, and you can see like the micro talents that you can get from there, the medium talents, and then the legendary medium nodes. And if you look here, you'll see talent panel, goddess of knowledge, Magister, Arcanist, Elementalist. When you're doing a legendary brand, you can get any of these from the list. But if you were to use a divinity pact, it'll actually make it that you can only get legendary divinities from that talent tree. So this one, for example, is the Magister one. And that would reduce the list of mods we can roll to just all of these that have the talent panel Magister listed for them. But if you don't use that, you can just randomly slam it, you'll just get a random mod. So in this case, we got Focus Blessing, which is actually a Magister mod. And once you get a mod once, you can't get it again. So we got this mod, gain 1 stack of Focus Blessing when activating a spell burst or generating a tangle from Magister. Now that we have that, we can't actually get it again. And we got Spell Block. So that's like the very basic concept of just like branding a divinity slate. What you also have access to is the ability to rotate and change the shape. So right now this is a Z shape, but we can actually adjust the shape to like turn it into whatever this Tetris shape is, another Tetris shape, a square, and there's one more shape, the L. And then on top of being able to do that, you can also rotate them. Now, changing shapes costs you 1 purple wedge, and rotating costs 2 of the blue wedges. And you can spam them. It is possible when changing the shape to get the shape you already have, though, which is rather stupid, but that is just how it works, unfortunately. Now, let's showcase the cube mechanic in the game itself. So when you get into the map of a cube mechanic, you'll actually notice sometimes on the map that you'll have these like monsters that have this pinkish red hue to them, these mobs. These are called desire mobs, or I'm not actually 100% sure about the name, but these are like the desire mobs. And when you kill them, they will give you desire crystals. The desire crystals you get to use at the end of the map to then gamble in the cube itself. So let's just quickly run through and just kill all of the mobs. Now, there's a few important notes that you need to know about the desire crystals. But essentially, the more drop quantity you have, the more desire crystals you'll generate. So it is very important to like juice drop quantity when doing cube. So we got 161 desire crystals, and now we can interact with the cube at the end of the map. And then when we interact with the cube, we can do this covet, which I recommend selecting auto covet to just significantly increase the speed at which you covet your cube. And it will start spending your desire crystals, just doing all of these like random options and whatnot. And it is very much just a RNG like gamble mechanic. And once you've spent your desire crystals, you can then claim rewards. Now, sometimes you'll see the greed option appear. I'll go into exactly when this appears a bit later, but this is a talent point you can do, and you can greed up to 3 times. But if you do press greed and the greed fails, you do lose all of the rewards. So, for example, here I have a Transcendence Wedge. I could greed now, make it ×2. And now if I claim it, I'll get 2 of these wedges instead. And everything here will go ×2. And I can click it again, and then I'm going to lose the greed. And then all of the rewards here will just go away. And the only thing that I'm going to get instead is going to be the Divinity Stones. Now, technically speaking, it is actually better to always greed in this game. Because even if you fail the greed, you still get Divinity Stones. So the net like value that you gain from greeding or not greed versus not greeding is slightly higher. But I personally would recommend, no matter what you do, just choose one thing and stick to it. If you're always going to greed 3 times, then greed 3 times always. If you're always going to greed once, then just greed once always. If you're never going to greed, you never ever greed. You don't like willy-nilly swap between them, because once you start doing that, you just kind of mess with your averages, and you might screw yourself over badly. It's better to just be consistent than put too much thought into it. Now, the cube mechanic, I already mentioned that it drops these divinity slates. They obviously also drop wedges. These transcendence wedges that you saw me use. But another thing you drop is divinity stones. So divinity stones is the gamble currency number 2, basically. You can either just directly sell your divinity stones, and they have a decent sale like price, by just listing it on the trade house, or you can come over to the Space-Time Wanderer and talk to him and do trial of and do blessings from the gods. Now, blessings from the gods is basically the window where you spend the divinity stones you get from doing cube. You'll find all sorts of things. You'll find FE here, you'll find wedges, you'll find flame sand, nether resonance. And if you ever like don't like what you see, you can spend 50 divinity stones to re-roll this into like new options. And there's a very low chance when you're like re-rolling this, not a very low chance, but there's also a chance when you're re-rolling them to then occasionally find some legendary items like this one, for example, Dumb Voice, which I honestly have never seen this item before in my life. I don't even know what it is, so I'm gonna buy it. Now, you can like try to figure out like, you know, how much is every item worth versus the divinity stones and stuff, but people have actually made calculators online where you can just put the current prices of wedges and legendary items and whatever like into a calculator, and it'll tell you at what price it is worth buying it. But something that is worth noting is, like, you see this FE here is worth 35 divinity stones. If we refresh, this FE, the single FE here, is only worth 34, for example. The price of FEs and anything that shows up in the shop is randomized. On the previous shop, we bought 5 FE for 108 stones. Now it's 229 stones. So this is like significantly more expensive to buy compared to the previous shop. But again, if you don't want to interact with that mechanic at all, generally it is worth doing it. But a lot of times you might just break even depending on your luck, or even lose a slight amount of money. You can just save yourself the time and just list this and sell it. It is entirely up to you if whether or not you want to interact with that aspect of the mechanic at all or not. So let me quickly go into the mechanics into the actual atlas. Now, if you ever do spec into cube, you almost always want to fully spec into it. It's not really worth it to like semi-spec into cube. It is worth it to put all of the points into the cube compass, or like into the cube tree, just because they all kind of just work together very well. There's one point that some people might not take that is worth mentioning, and it's this node. In Netherrealm Sages, Malice Incarnations have minus 3% additional crystal drop quantity. So what this means is the crystal drop quantity refers to desire crystals, which is just your currency to roll the cube with. If you take this point, you will roll a lot less cubes, which means less chances to get corners, less chances to get slates, etc. But it will make it that when you do a cube of craving, there, when you do a covet, I mean, there's a 20% chance to get an additional desire core. What is covet? It is basically the golden option on the cube. I'll showcase that for you in the next cube. And there's another mechanic in this that also interacts with that, which is the greed mechanic. So, greeding on the cube is only unlocked when you covet the cube. So generally when you roll the cube, if you don't hit a covet, you aren't actually able to do the greed option. Which is why we put points here, because all of these points increases the chance of us coveting. And coveting is very, very powerful, because not only does it have a very high chance to give us something good, like, you know, legendary wedges, it has a chance to give us desire cores, it has a chance to give us FE, but it also unlocks the ability to then greed, if you're a person who wants to do greed always. These points on the right here especially are very, very potent to take early into the league, because this will cause more bosses to spawn in your maps, and those bosses do have like boss effects applied to them. For example, the pirate embers that you generate from having the pirate pet do work on the cube bosses. So these points up here are all of the points for desire cores. These points spawn extra mobs in your map, which are very important to have, and extra bosses. The last point, however, I should note, or should mention, is the point that spawns Malice Judges. Malice Judges are like super beefed up bosses, and you might struggle a bit killing the judges. I think, generally speaking, it isn't worth it to spec into judges if your build just can't handle them. It is fine to just have this last point not be taken early on, but you definitely want to get to a point where your build can't kill the judges, because they are very, very worthwhile to kill. Which is also why we want to spawn them. Actually, also, an extra note, it is very rare, but if you have this point taken here, in 1% of your maps, all the monsters will be replaced with Malice Incarnations. And what that essentially means is the amount of desire crystals you get on that one single map is significantly increased. You'll get a significant amount more desire crystals, because these Malice Incarnations are what actually gives you desire crystals. And like, I would say a very small portion of the map mobs are actually converted into Malice Incarnations. So having the entire map converted into it just gives you like infinite desire crystals, basically. Which is just the pop-off map. If this does happen, and you do notice every mob in the map is a Malice Incarnation, it is worth it to swap to like 4 cube pets just for that one map. These points down here give you increased cover chance, and they also make it that you can do +1 greed, +1 greed. So I mentioned that you can greed 4 times. You can only greed, 3 times. The only reason you can greed more than once is because this gives you +1 greed attempt, and this gives you +1 greed attempt. Then these points down here is, again, more cover chance, but this also gives you this very interesting one, which is when you're coveting, there's also 1% chance to just randomly get a corner. So corner is also part of the items you can get from coveting, as well as giving you the chance to get the Transcendence Wedge Legendary from coveting. You can see of all of these effects that come from coveting, it's very worth it to stack as much cover chance as possible, because we want to hit as many of them as we can. And then lastly, this is all points that makes it that when you're doing, when you're coveting... Oh wait, I misspoke a bit on the coveting, but I'll explain when we get into a map. It's easier to explain visually either way. All of these are points essentially that makes it that when you're busy coveting or like using the cube, that it has a chance to consume less desire crystals. So normally when you covet, it costs 20 desire crystals per like cube spin. But these can just make it that like it consumes 5 less or it consumes 10 less, or sometimes it's even free to covet, which is just nice. It essentially just gives you more spins of the cube. Okay, and then let's go into the map quickly. I can talk a bit more about the cube before we like run into it. Before we spin it, I mean.
Light and shadow can deceive the eyes, but a scent never tells lies.
Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So I mentioned that you're not always able to like greed. Essentially, this right here, Cube of Craving. This is this special cube that you can hit. When you hit a Cube of Craving, this is essentially the thing that can give you like the legendary wedges. It can give you the it can give you like the desire crystals, all those things. They always come after hitting a Cube of Craving. And you try and increase the chances of hitting Cube of Cravings. And you need to hit either Cube of Craving, or I believe also a special event counts as well, to be able to do a greed. Actually, no, okay. We did a special event, this does not count. So on this map, we didn't hit a single Cube of Craving. And because we didn't hit a single Cube of Craving, we don't actually have the greed option. And we also had no chance of getting like a desire crystal or anything like that, because those only happen when you hit a Cube of Craving. So a lot of the points that you take on the tree, they increase the odds of you hitting those Cubes of Craving. Okay, I think that's a good explanation of the game, or like of the mechanic as a whole. Now, one thing that I did mention here that we have not covered yet is desire crystals. What exactly is a desire crystal? Or like a desire core? Just like with the Black Cell video, this is the void boss for Cube. So if you do Cube, you have access to the Lawbreaker. And just like Black Cell, he has 3 tiers to him. And you can only get corners and divinity slates from doing Cuban maps. But Fallen Starlights, this all comes from the Cube boss. In fact, it's guaranteed that the Cube boss always drops a Fallen Starlight. So if you're tier 1 loot that gives you Fallen Starlights and Cube of the Desire Core Creations. On your tier 2 loot, you get Wings of Light, which is a very good chase unique. You then get access to Unifying Wedges, which is how you reset your brands. So essentially, when you're doing your crafting on your Goddess of Knowledge, once you hit this point, there's no way to like redo your brandings. You can re-roll these brands like very easily, but the legendary brands you can't actually re-roll or try again. The only way to like reset this cube back to its base state and try again to hit the mods you want is to click on Restore and then use a Unifying Wedge, which you get from the desire from the Lawbreaker boss. And you can also get a Prairie. You can get Sparks from this boss, and you can get access to Stray Fireflies, which you can then give in to get a moth, basically. And obviously other stuff that you can clearly see on their screen. But the main thing that this boss does is he gives you your Fallen Starlights and he gives you your moths. That's like the main 2 chase things that people farm it for. I'm probably not going to spend as much time as I did on the previous video going over this boss, because it is essentially the exact same thing as we saw with the Black Cell video. Now, Cube does have access to 3 different compasses. It does not just have the 2 compasses. We have the base compass, which is just the cube compass, which makes it that the cube like actually spawns in your map. And it also gives you 20% additional drop quantity from Malice Incarnations, which is just a nice bonus on top. But this also just lets you not take those 15 points to spawn the cube in your map. Then we have access to the purple compass. Now, the purpose compass will spawn 2 additional Desire Incarnations. Desire Incarnations are essentially the elite, or like the boss monsters of the cube. So this will spawn 2 extra boss monsters, which just give you more Desire Crystals, as well as give you access to, you know, more boss monsters on your map to, like, gain value from using Pirate and stuff like that.
True strength never sits on a throne. It is in the roots of the very
Actually,
trample on
now that I think about it, it doesn't necessarily have to be boss monsters. It can just be any elite monster. But it has a chance to be a boss monster. Where is that? Yeah, so it just wants 2 additional Desire Incarnations. The Desire Incarnations, though, are the special, like, elites. And they can be... They have a bunch of them listed, which also includes the cube boss monsters. And like you can see from this map, we got 438 Desire Crystals. We got significantly more than we did in other maps. And that is in part thanks to the purple compass, which just gives us a lot more juice. Of course, though, we hit absolutely nothing. Never mind, we had something. Okay, so we hit 1 Cube of Craving, which is now going to give us access to the Greed option. Never lucky. Okay, and then the last compass that we have access to is the Purple Compass. The Purple Compass is a very interesting one. It completely changes the way the cube gameplay works. It has quite a few mechanisms to it. So the first thing that this does is it makes it that there will be like mini cubes spawned throughout the map, and you can run over these mini cubes. And when you run over them, they have a chance to spawn like enemies, including a cube goblin. Now the enemies it spawns is like kind of whatever. The big thing you're after is the cube goblin, because this cube goblin, when you kill it, will give you an absurd amount of Desire Crystals. Like I'm talking like 500. And on top of that, what it will also do, it'll make it that when you consume Desire Crystals rolling the cube, it does cost an additional 20 Desire Crystals. So instead of being 4 per covet, it's not instead of costing 20 per covet, it's now 40 per covet. But any items that are in the cube will be times 2'd. Which means that anything you see in the cube is going to drop times 2. So if you have a cube pet proc, the cube pet makes it that the cube either gets times 2'd or times 3'd. And that value also then gets times 2'd on top of that. So if people say they dropped like 6, I don't know, prairies, for example, it means they were using this compass and the cube pet proc at the same time. So these are like the mini Desire cores that you'll see throughout the maps, and this one spawned me a boss monster. This one spawned nothing. This one spawned nothing. This one spawned a boss monster. Nothing. 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 I would really like to drop a goblin, please. Nothing. Boss monster. And nothing. Okay, we did not see a single fucking goblin. This is like extremely bad RNG, unfortunately. But it's going to be a proper way to showcase what I mean with the double mechanic. So we dropped only 2 purple wedges, but because we have this compass in, it's actually going to drop us 4 of these purple wedges. Which is essentially what I mean when I say it doubles the drops you get. Let's do one more run. I want to show you guys the goblin. Now, Cube is actually a very, very strong mechanic to do on League Start. It's similar to Black Cell in the sense that it does technically fall off. I think it's significantly better in the late game than Black Cell is, though. The big issue that Black Cell has is it doesn't have, like, really any way of juicing it. Like, the purple compass just makes it that you get to the end chest reward faster, but it doesn't actually make the end chest reward better in any way. Whereas for Cube, there are ways to juice the mechanic and actually make it better at the end of the map. So even though this is a early league mechanic, because very early into the league, all of these wedge materials are worth an absolute fortune. And all of the slates you drop, like almost all of them are going to be worth at least something. even when the mechanic starts to fall off later in the league, you're still gonna have some like
Strength never sits alone.
chase items that you can drop and get lucky with.
Plants you trample underfoot.
For example, any like meta slate or corner that you drop is gonna go for an absolute fortune later into the league. And I know a lot of people who like do cube juicing in deep space and stuff. Because cube scales with your drop quantity, like the drop quantity in the map, which means that it does actually gain a lot of value. It does gain a ton of value by having, you know, higher difficulty content and juicing it. Now, I did mention that cube scales with drop quantity. So generally, a setup that you might want to do with cube is in Tarmok 3, I think it's worth it to combine your cube compass, whether you use orange or purple, with strength in numbers. The reason for this is strength in numbers gives you 10% additional drop count for normal monsters. The majority of the cube monsters are basically split into two. There's elites from cube, and then there's the normal monsters from cube. The elites from cube seemingly have a set amount of desire crystals that they drop. It doesn't seem like they're affected by drop count at all. They always give the same amount. But then the normal monsters from cube are affected by drop quant. So this 20% additional drop quantity does give you more desire crystals, so it's worth running. And similarly, you can also run a sinful plunder. So this is like a very good example of what a like Time Rock 8 setup might look early into the league, where you're going to be running purple sinful plunder, purple strength for numbers, and then either orange cube, or you could consider purple cube. I personally would just run orange because it's more fun. I really like the gimmick of the orange cube. But both are fine to do. And then later, if you run this mechanic on D-Space, you can then consider adding the orange cube. Or like if you run it in Profound, you can consider also adding orange plunder, sinful plunder, to add even more juice to it. But in general, anything that gives you extra normal monster drop count is going to be good for this mechanic. And anything that just gives you generic drop count is going to be good for this mechanic. With that being said, though, I do want to talk a bit about... Let me showcase the difference, actually, and just how much desire crystals you get by juicing it. Before we do anything else. And I'll even put in my cube pad. Oh, we had a goblin spawn. See, we had one goblin spawn, and we're already at 1,400 desire crystals. This is partially because we're juicing the map now, which is doing a absolute massive ton. And it's also partially because of the goblin. So we're at 1,855. Let's see if we can get a boss. We kill this boss, and we're at 2,064. So the drop count has a pretty large effect on just like the generic mobs you spawn. But if you happen to hit a goblin on top of that, you will absolutely just pop off. It is not this rare to hit goblins. We're just getting insanely unlucky in this map showcase, unfortunately. But hey, that's life. It's gonna happen. And now when you juice the maps, you can end up with like 2,600 desire crystals. And you're gonna spend a much longer time waiting for the cube to roll out. But that's part of why people love this mechanic. This is like what you're doing it for, right? You love the big gamble at the end and just having your entire screen filled with items. And hopefully some of them are good. Yeah, this is your designated food break when you have a really good map. This isn't that good of a map, but like you can have maps that get up to like 4k crystals. I believe the cap on desire crystals is 5k. I don't think you can go beyond 5k in a single map. Although I'm not actually completely sure. So there's a few strategies for pets and whatnot. Without going into what the pets do, the big thing, or like the big reason why you would run the pet in for mapping in general, is because the pets do have a line on them that gives you more desire crystals. I did some testing with it, and in my experience, the best setup for the pets is to run the purple pet, Captain Shadow, Early League specifically, Captain Shadow, and then the new Twilight Sprox pet, that seemed to give me the most amount of... We have to read this. Classic. Absolutely classic. Okay, let's go over what the cube pet does. So the cube pet is a very, very, very powerful pet. Ow. Why did you throw nut in my face? Ow. So the cube pet at level 1 gives you a 22% chance to double all of the items within the cube itself. And then when you level this up, it has a chance to, instead of doubling it, to triple the items. And if you can take this pet all the way to level 5, it's a 100% chance that instead of doubling the items, it will triple the items instead. And then if you take it to level 6, instead of being a 22% chance to double the items, it's a 30% chance to basically triple the items. So at level 3, it has a 30% chance to triple the items. At level 5, it's a 100% chance to triple the items. And at level 6, instead of it being a 22% chance to hit the double/triple, it's a 30% chance to hit the triple. And on top of that, this pet does have 20% Desire Crystal drop quantity and 30% Divinity Stone drop quantity. And the Hell Cavalry, or like the purple pet, instead has a 38% chance to drop Divinity Stones and 30% chance to drop Desire Crystals. So the purple pet is slightly better than the orange one for just generic mapping. And in my experience, the best setup, what a lot of people do is if they don't have access to all of the pets, they will run both the orange and purple cube pet for mapping and then run like a generic quant pet. If you do have access to the pets that I have access to, in my opinion, the best setup for this is to do the purple pet, Twilight Sparks, and then Pirate. The reason we do Pirate is because I tend to do Cube early into the league, and Embers early into the league are worth a ton of FE. And Pirate gets quite a lot of value because Cube spawns so many boss mobs that you just have his proc happen multiple times in a single map. Instead of Pirate, you could run just a generic FE pet if you wanted to, or you could consider running the orange Cube pet. It was like later in the league, especially if you're like juicing the mechanic a lot. We're out of orange cube. But yeah, that's all from me. I hope this explanation and video guide was helpful for people. I guess talking about just cubes like place in the game, I think if you're going to spec into cube, it is worth it to go full invest cube. I don't think it's worth it to try and fit other mechanics in with cube. And if I were you, like I would spend all of your points going to cube, and then spend the leftover points getting like more drop quant. Like I personally went for this 12% additional drop quant, as well as going for mechanics that just give you drop quantity. Like, you can just go generic drop quantity on the drop quant tree. You can go for anything that drops from bosses, like Resonance, for example, and Embers. I do think it's probably worth it to go Embers and Resonance. Or you can even go for things like Snowpaper, because Snowpaper drops from bosses. I wouldn't worry about this too much. If you're going to do full juice cube, though, you definitely should pick up as much drop quantity as possible and not have as low drop quantity as I have. This was just a very early league setup that I was doing. And like, I don't even remember when I made this tree or why I made this tree, to be honest with you. I was mostly just using it to test out cube. I hope this video was helpful for you. I hope this video was helpful for YouTube, and I hope you guys had a lovely time. And I wish you all the best league start. Bye, YouTube. Bye-bye. Ow. Thanks, bud.